Miaolin once traveled through the world, but was unexpectedly treated by the system as a major bug, with only 1 month left in her lifespan. Is she a big bug? Are you joking? Does she have such a big black hole? In this world, she has a doting grandmother and mute mother, and even holds a script. How could she make her whole family become cannon fodder in the book? She wants to change her fate with her family, but isn't the female lead in the original book very kind? Why are you thinking about killing her everywhere? Shrimp rice. Does the female lead also have a system on her body? Or a system that repairs the integrity of the book world? To repair the world of books, we must start by eliminating her little cannon fodder. It's fun now, and the patch system on my body has become a cannon fodder system that doesn't hurt my parents. By the way, besides the female lead, isn't there also a male lead in this book? Originally, she wasn't interested in the original male lead, but in order to change her fate and patch it up, she can only conquer him now. After all, once she has taken care of the male lead, she will become the world's female lead. Keywords of the novel. Year married scholar. Little wife with system lies and wins without pop-ups, year married scholar. Little wife with system lies and wins. Complete download of TXT. Year married scholar. Little wife with system lies and wins latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Crossing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Crossing, Dirty. Dirty. My body is dirty and my feet stink. I eat baba during the day and night. Eat baba. As soon as Miaolin woke up, she heard the shouts and mocking laughter of the children around her. She thought to herself, these children are too impolite, how could they be so harmful? Miaolin didn't think those children were talking about her. After all, she was a beautiful, kind-hearted, and clean 9th level planting master. In the afterlife, no one was willing to harm this planting master. Miaolin has decided that she will teach these children a lesson so that they can no longer bully others. How can she call a girl with these words? That's really too much. Ding. Z. What sound? Miaolin suddenly heard a little noise. She didn't know what it was and felt a bit strange. The children around were still making a fuss. When Miaolin opened her eyes, she was a bit dumbfounded. What was going on in front of her? Why are these children wearing clothes with big patches and small patches? And the person they are currently surrounding is actually her. And when they shout dirty, they all look at her, and most importantly, she smells a faint odor around her. Dirty. Dirty. Ah. 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 At this moment, a driving sound similar to that of a deaf-mute sounded around, and the children were driven away by this sound. A boy shouted loudly towards this side, "Mute girl. Mute girl. Dirty girl. There's a mute girl." Then quickly, a group of children laughed and ran towards the distance, seemingly shouting something like a mute girl. Miaolin only felt particularly frustrated. These children are too bad. She really can't see anyone who is inherently good at first. Ding. Z. Miaolin heard this strange sound again, but her head was a bit groggy now. She raised her hand to stroke her forehead, but when she found that her hand had turned into dirty and black little paws, her whole body suddenly felt dizzy again. This was really exciting again, and as for the strange movement, she threw it behind her head. Immediately after, a memory exploded like a tide and moon in her sea of consciousness, and she unexpectedly crossed over. This is an unknown world, although it is somewhat similar to her original world in the 1960s and 1970s, the leaders here are completely different from her own world. Dirty doesn't know much, but from her memory, Miaolin feels that there is still a bit of feudal residue in this world, especially unfair to women. The original owner's name is also Miaolin, so there's no need to worry about others calling her by name. She won't react anymore. But the original owner had a nickname called Yaya, and every day it was dirty, so the people in the village called her Dirty. Dirty. Listening to such an uncomfortable name, the original owner was 12 years old, with a mute mother and a powerful grandmother. Her mother and Milk were both well-known widows in the village. The saying goes that there is a lot of trouble in front of widows. Even if their family doesn't usually cause trouble, there are often people who trouble them. At this moment, the mute mother drove the children away and walked up to Miaolin's side, looking at her with concern. The mute mother's face was also pitch black, but her eyes were very bright. Miaolin also saw her shadow in her eyes, which was a pitch-black coal ball. Faint. She wanted to cry, but after finally reviving her life, why is she so ugly? The mute mother looked at her with concern. Although she couldn't speak, there seemed to be 1,000 words in her eyes. Miaolin was a bit at a loss. She now occupied the original owner's body, making her feel a bit guilty towards the woman in front of her, especially when facing her heavy love. After all, eyes cannot deceive people. Miaolin was helped up by the mute mother, and the dirt on her body didn't even have time to be patted. She was pulled home directly, and their house was located at the edge of the village, and it was also at the foot of the mountain, almost 100 meters away from the nearest house. From her residence, Miaolin could tell that their family was probably excluded by the people of Zhou village. And there are also things that can be learned from the memory of the original owner, as well as the bullying of the children towards the original owner, which can be seen. When the original owner's father was still alive, their family had a house in the village. However, after her father's death, their family only had 2 widows and a little girl left, which was actually considered extinct in the village. Their house was taken over by a cousin. If it weren't for such a dilapidated house on the edge of the village, their ancestors and grandchildren would probably not even have a place to live for 3 generations. Miaolin's grandmother, Miao Xiufeng, was originally from this village. When Miao grandma was young, she was also a beautiful and good girl from all over the country. However, she was born at a bad time. At that time, bandits were rampant, and Miao grandma was kidnapped along with several girls from the village. When she was rescued, she was already pregnant. However, her situation is considered good because the girls from other families were all abused to death. It is said that Grandma Miao was taken by the military strategists in the village at that time, which saved her life. In that difficult era, Grandma Miao gave birth to a boy whose father was unknown. Due to insufficient nutrition during pregnancy, the original owner's father grew up with a medicine spoon from birth. As for the mute mother, it was picked up by Grandma Miao, and she fled from the wilderness. At that time, our family was poor, and no one was willing to adopt a deaf-mute person, especially a loser. However, at that time, Grandma Miao thought of her own weak son, so she adopted him. She went out to deal with the loneliness and helplessness of her mute mother. This was a child bride prepared for her own son. The father of the medicine jar and the mute mother grew up together, and because they relied on each other since childhood, their relationship is still very deep. They gave birth to Miaolin the 2nd year after getting married, and the family had no preference for sons over daughters. They were all very happy about Miaolin's birth. Because Grandma Miao learned from her past experiences and paid great attention to taking care of her mute mother during her pregnancy, Miaolin is a very healthy child. But in the following days, there were people of all ages in medicine jars at home, which was really a heavy burden. The father of the medicine jars stopped taking medicine, and he didn't want to be a burden on his family anymore. So, in Miaolin's 1 week, the father of the medicine jars went, leaving only 3 generations of women in the family. Miaolin can be said to be the support of the other 2 women in the family. The mute mother looks very beautiful. After the father of the medicine jar left, several widowers wanted to marry the mute mother. These people were eventually scared away by Grandma Miao with a big machete. It's not that Grandma Miao was selfish because she had communicated with Grandma Miao and wanted to keep her children and not marry again. Later on, it wasn't that no one had said it, but with Grandma Miao's demeanor of cutting someone off, no one dared to propose marriage again. Miaolin was brought back home by the mute mother. Although her face was very dirty, she smelled it and there was no foul smell on her body. But why did she have a foul smell on her clothes? Upon seeing her granddaughter return, Grandma Miao nervously stepped forward and looked up and down at her. Seeing that her granddaughter was not injured, she smiled and said, "Yaya, let's go eat. Grandma made your favorite dish." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Big Bugs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Big Bugs. Miaolin was pulled to the table by Grandma Miao. To be honest, the Miao family's family situation was not very good, but the original owner Miaolin did not suffer any injustice because there was something good, and both elders fed her. However, even so, 12-year-old Miaolin is only 1.3 meters tall, a bit like 7 or 8 years old, still too thin and weak. Grandma. Miaolin didn't feel how difficult it was to say the word grandma. After all, the original owner's dependence on her grandmother and mother was not average high, almost like the level of milk control and mother control. "Yaya, come and eat." Miaolin reached out and looked at her black paws, but ultimately decided to wash them. After washing her hands, Miaolin saw a pair of delicate hands, white and tender. These hands were so beautiful that she was stunned. She thought she was a black coal ball, but didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. Grandma Miao walked over and let out a light sigh. "Yaya, please endure for a few more years. When they can find a boy who doesn't dislike her, they will marry Yaya because only those who treat her sincerely can truly be good to their Yaya." At this moment, the mute mother picked up a mud cloth and slowly wiped Miaolin's hands until her daughter's hands were as dirty as before she stopped. Miaolin probably understood the meaning of her grandmother and mute mother in her heart, probably because the original owner was too beautiful, they were afraid they wouldn't be able to protect her. Miaolin sat at the dinner table, looking down at her two black claws. Although she didn't have a cleanliness fetish, these dirty claws had already made her lose any appetite, even though she felt very hungry now. Sigh. What kind of body did she inherit? Just let her know that in this world, beauty is the original sin, especially in this remote and impoverished place, as her grandmother and mute mother look like they are facing great enemies. The clothes here really look like their world from the 1950s and 1960s. To be honest, the 1950s and 1960s were already considered 1,000 years ago in their post-apocalyptic history. Coupled with the cruelty of the post-apocalyptic era and cultural gaps, she couldn't see much documentation and couldn't draw inspiration from the historical events of that time. Not right. It seems she has saved a lot of books, maybe she can find some to take a look at. According to the original owner's memory, Miaolin only knew that there was a stone town further south of Zhou village, and to the north was 100,000 miles of Daqing mountain. The mountains were continuous, and those who wanted to enter the deep mountains could hardly return safely. To the left of Zhou village is Chadao village, and to the right is Qingshan village. Going further away, the original owner is unclear, because even the farthest place where the mute mother went is just a stone town. As for where the mute mother wandered from, no one knows at all, and she herself cannot say. In recent years, there have been years of famine in our hometown, and their grandparents and grandchildren have not left the village for a long time. Grandma Miao said that the outside world is too chaotic and not suitable for them to wander aimlessly as orphans and widows. Miaolin felt particularly heavy when she thought about these things. In this world, most people still reject women from showing their faces. Although their family was excluded by the people in the village, fortunately, the village head of Zhou village was a cousin of Grandma Miao. They didn't receive any harsh criticism for earning work points in their daily work, and overall, their life was relatively decent. In her memory, Miaolin did not see any inappropriate actions taken by the villagers towards her family. The ignorant children from the village would bully Miaolin, while the adults simply ignored her family. Actually, upon careful consideration, being driven out of the village was not something that Grandma Miao had done on her own. As for why Grandma Miao wants to leave the crowd, in Miaolin's opinion, it may be because of her appearance and other issues. After lunch, Miaolin was driven back to her room by her grandmother to rest. Although the house of the Miao family is a bit dilapidated, there are many rooms. At least their ancestors and grandchildren can still have one room per person for 3 generations. In addition, there is a kitchen and a firewood shed in the yard. Miaolin walked into her own room, with a faint odor at the tip of her nose. She couldn't bear it, but her skin problem was a big problem. In my memory, even if the people in the whole village were clean, they wouldn't be as tender and white as she was. Although Miaolin felt that this was largely due to the fact that the original owner had never worked before, looking at the movements of her grandmother and mute mother, she also had a feeling that there was something wrong with her body. Grandma Miao and the mute mother dote on her too much, unwilling to let her do any work at all, afraid that she might get hurt or something. Is it because after being injured, she will bleed endlessly? It's spring now, and Miaolin originally planned to lie directly in bed, but the bed looked very clean. She took off her coat and smelled that there was no odor on her body before lying in bed. Feeling a hint of coolness, Miaolin covered herself with the blanket and began to observe her current body, which was delicate and thin. Even if her grandmother and mute mother gave her delicious food, it was not enough nutrition for her body. Thinking about her identity as a master planter in the apocalypse, she can only vaguely feel a faint wooden ability. She closed her eyes and began to slowly accumulate wooden abilities. She is really weak now. However, before she could accumulate any wood energy, she heard a voice saying, "The system is detecting and the big bug has been successfully bound." What binding was successful? Miaolin couldn't believe her ears. What sound did she hear? Big bug successfully bound. Where is the big bug? Miaolin sat up and observed around. The room was not big, and it was clear at a glance that there was no one else besides her. After system testing, the host has detected a major bug. Please try your best to fix it, otherwise it will be destroyed by humans in 3 years. Xiami. I am a big bug and will be destroyed by humanity. Miaolin was stunned. What big bug am I? What is a patch? After trying to survive again, she was still choked by a system. Even if she could live for another 3 years, she was only 15 years old, and her youth had just begun. Miaolin took a deep breath, but the system was silent at this moment. The system speaks. Miaolin was really angry. At this point, the system said, the host only needs to follow the plot to find a way to patch it. Miaolin wanted to curse, and finally had a hard time reviving herself. She thought she could live a peaceful life in this life, but now she is constrained by the so-called system. Big bug. Perhaps her rebirth to the original owner was a big bug. Miaolin doesn't know what the plot is, she continues to accumulate with type abilities, and now most importantly, she needs to become stronger. Miaolin can only confirm that she has wooden abilities, but she hasn't started yet. It's impossible to accumulate a large amount of abilities, and accumulating so little is really exhausting. What should we do? At this moment, she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly lifted her left hand. Then, she looked at the wrist of her left hand, where she saw a small red mole. The update time is tentatively set at 15.00 and 16.00 respectively. We hope everyone can support us. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Inventory of Warehouse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Inventory of Warehouse. This red mole was her space from her previous life and was invented by those space psychics in the late apocalypse. The one in her hand was considered the largest space at that time, and it was also a planting space. After all, Miaolin was a powerful wood-based superpower and a master planter in the apocalypse, and half of the food in the entire Huaqing base came from her hands. Of course, she didn't do her best and even withheld a lot of food. In her space, there were many treasures, and at that time, many people secretly exchanged food with her. She was always willing to come, after all, she was professional in growing food. Miaolin listened carefully, and there was no sound of any movement from Grandma Miao and Mute Nyang's side. They should also rest for a while now, after all, they still have to work in the afternoon. Don't be fooled by the fact that Grandma Miao and Mute Nyang are women, but they can earn more than 8 work points every day. These two can do it. Miaolin whispered directly, "Go in." She disappeared into the room, and the entire planting space was about 20 acres. She had a small second-floor villa with a container in the corner, which was a place for her to rest. Next to it was a row of container houses, which was the warehouse of her space. At this moment, the sound of the system rang out again. Discovering the planting space, has the host integrated the system and space? Not fused. This space belongs to her, but if it were fused, it may not necessarily be her anymore. Is it foolish for her? System-bound space allows for systematic management of space. No need at the moment. Miaolin refused. With so many good things in her warehouse, she wouldn't share them with the system. The warehouse is a row of containers, each with 20 containers stacked on top of 5 layers. Among them, the containers on the 2nd to 5th layers are the ones she needs to deliver to the base, all of which are filled with food. Various fruit trees are planted around the 20-acre land, and now the fruit trees are still abundant. Previously, she ripened them but hung them before picking them. The villa is surrounded by about half an acre of land, where some vegetables are planted. Although there are also vegetables outside, the vegetables here are better because they are all grown by Miaolin. Picking a tomato directly from the garden, Miaolin planned to nibble on it, but seeing her black paws, she couldn't eat it anymore. Outside the villa, except for half an acre of grapes and half an acre of strawberries, everything else is a field for growing crops. Now there are some young seedlings growing in the field, and she planted seeds while harvesting the crops. She originally planned to rest for a period of time before giving birth. But now she doesn't have this ability, she can only let them grow naturally. Miaolin still remembers that the day she had an accident was because she accompanied the base leaders to inspect the farmland outside. However, they were really unlucky and encountered high-level zombies. If it weren't for someone in the same group pushing her, she would probably have lived well in the afterlife. She shook her head and let it go. The end of the world has nothing to do with her anymore. If it weren't for the so-called big bugs and system patches, it would be quite good to have traveled through here. When it comes to patching, how does it make her feel like this world is a gaming world? Is it really the gaming world? Why else do we need to patch it? But she hasn't played this game before, why should she come in? Depressed, how can I patch it? Speaking of which, in the apocalypse, she could have lived in this space, but she was really afraid that when she woke up, she would be the only one left in the world. The high-level zombie slaughter was just a matter of minutes, and if she wanted to die, she would have to die with everyone. She didn't want to be alone, and to be honest, she really enjoyed trading with people. Wait. Trade. Can't the patch just trade with this world? Thinking of this, Miaolin's eyes lit up, but a voice came to her mind, the host is wrong. System, what exactly are you talking about using to patch? Miaolin was really angry. The system stopped talking again, and Miaolin was feeling frustrated. She really suspected that the system was trying to harm her now. Just like the woman who harmed her in her previous life, I don't know what kind of fate that woman will have. Miaolin remembers that woman was also a wood-type superpower, but her abilities were too weak. It is likely because of jealousy that she was harmed. Miaolin decided to inspect her warehouse, hoping that there was not a shortage of items in her warehouse. If there were any missing items, it would definitely be the system that took them away. I haven't touched your warehouse. The system is depressed. It's just a patch system and can't even release tasks. How could it possibly take away her things? Miaolin was too lazy to pay attention to the system, so she walked to the warehouse. The bottom floor was filled with her personal belongings, some she collected herself and some she exchanged with others. The first container contained a kitchen, and she didn't want to cook in her small villa because her sense of smell was very strong. Not to mention the smell of cooking, she could smell the smell of burning iron pots from afar. So to avoid unnecessary trouble, she directly moved the kitchen to the outside warehouse, as she had plenty of containers. Besides cooking, she also eats here, and this container is where she cooks and eats. This second container is filled with more than 10 refrigerators, all of which are filled with exotic animal meat. Apart from being distributed to her in the designated area, some of these exotic animal meat are also exchanged with her. The second and fourth containers are all filled with clothes and various accessories that she can wear. In addition to various women's clothing, there are also some casual clothes suitable for her, and even some men's clothing and hats. Except for the clothes she often wears in the villa, the rest is stored here. Unfortunately, she can't wear any of the clothes here anymore. Besides not being suitable for this era, her height is also insufficient. The fifth and sixth containers were filled with her favorite jewelry and jewelry. These items were all garbage in the apocalypse, but she just enjoyed collecting them. Moreover, many people exchanged these items with her for food, and she refused to accept them. After all, what she needed the most was food. In the seventh container, there are some messy books, all kinds of books. Some people exchange books for food, and she also exchanges them. Of course, novels are her favorite. The eighth and ninth containers contain tissues, sanitary pads, and diapers, which she slowly collected on her own. These were essential items in daily life, and those diapers could be used even after having children. From the 10th to the 20th, there was everything inside, in a mess. She piled it all up here. By the way, there is another place, which is under her small villa. There are 3 parallel container basements filled with various snacks. For the little fairy, snacks are an essential thing. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Turns out she's a big bug in the book. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Turns out she's a big bug in the book. In front of the warehouse, there is still a row of cars parked, including trucks, various cars, motorcycles, electric bikes, and bicycles. However, these bicycles are all very beautiful and not suitable for the current era. Miaolin walked to the nearby field and tried to release her own wooden ability. The ability was too weak now, not even reaching level 1. She really had to start from scratch. She didn't know if the ability level had changed back to her life. The host is a big bug, just like a cosmic black hole. Your abilities are not enough to make you reborn. Rebirth should be another energy that the system cannot detect. Of course, if it can be detected, Miaolin will not become a big bug in this world. You are the black hole, your whole family is a black hole. Miaolin was very angry, and she just sighed. Why did you become a black hole? The system remained silent, and Miaolin was too lazy to pay attention to it. Miaolin walked directly to the container where the jewelry was placed, and then opened a cabinet in the corner. The cabinet was very high, with a total of 10 large drawers from top to bottom. She took out a low-level wooden crystal core from one of the layers, sat cross-legged on an open space, and began to absorb it. After about half an hour of use, Miaolin let out a breath. Her wooden ability stabilized at level 1, and then some movement and stillness came from outside. She came out of the space directly, put on her clothes, and walked out. Grandma Miao and the mute mother have already picked up their hoes and baskets and are ready to go to work. Grandma Miao saw her granddaughter walking out and said, "Yaya, don't go out again this afternoon. How about staying at home obediently?" "Grandma, I want to go dig wild vegetables." Miaolin doesn't want to stay at home, she wants to go out, and she has to find what the patch is. "You don't need to dig, Grandma just needs to dig." Grandma Miao looked at Miaolin with a loving gaze, and Miaolin nodded at her. According to the original owner's experience, if she didn't agree, Grandma Miao would preach for a long time, probably delaying her start to work. In Grandma Miao's eyes, Miaolin, the granddaughter, always comes first. When Grandma Miao and Mute Nyang left, they directly locked the door for Miaolin's safety. Miaolin is speechless. Is the original owner so untrustworthy? She is now 12 years old, not just 2 years old. However, looking back at those memories, it seems that the original owner is a bit unbelievable, not only innocent but also slightly silly. Miaolin looked at her small courtyard and planned to find a place to sit for a while. She took out a small stool from the room and ran straight to the vegetable garden in the backyard. She still enjoyed spending time with the plants. Miaolin took a look at the vegetable garden in her backyard and found it to be almost in a semi-abandoned state. After all, spring has just begun, and the small vegetable garden also has the leftovers from last year. Miaolin quietly gave birth to a big onion in front of her. To be honest, although she has reached level 1 now, her ability is still a bit weak. It took her a while to give birth to this onion before it started to grow. Just as Miaolin was returning to the front yard with a stool, she heard the sound of donkey carts and voices outside. Then a voice came to my mind, ding, the plot has emerged. Cousin. This place is too poor, isn't it really good for us to go to the countryside here? A petite female voice spoke in grievances, and just by listening to her voice, one could feel that she was definitely a petite young lady. Anan, my cousin is here, I can't starve you. The man's voice was slightly spoiled. Cousin, isn't this Zhou village? Why didn't you see a jujube tree? The girl's voice rang out again, accompanied by the sound of the old donkey in the village. Mr. Miao, who was driving, said, Zhou is a person's name, not a tree. Zhou village is named after a person's name, not any jujube trees. At this moment, a slightly magnetic male voice called out, Fatty, Fat, wake up, we're here. Fatty, Anan, and cousin, these 3 keywords came together and reminded Miaolin of a novel she had read. It seemed like she had put the book in the warehouse. Collaborating with her is like a big bug in the book. Miaolin quickly ran into her room and then entered the library of the space. She dug out a book called Anan Going to the Countryside. Anan is the female protagonist Yuan, and her cousin, Zhao Xiangqian, is one of her licking dogs. This table spans 3,000 miles, and the two actually have no blood relationship. They are from Haisha. The magnetic voice just now was called Gu Yuan, Red 3rd Generation, the male lead of this book, and that chubby guy should be his followers Wafian. These 2 people are from Beijing. Miaolin quickly flipped through the novel again, and in chapter 20, she saw something about her own family, which can be considered a passing passage. One morning after the female protagonist had adapted to farming for a month, she heard some bad news. The widow's family in the village had 3 generations of ancestors and grandchildren burned to death in a big fire. She heard that there was a little girl named Dirtiya in that family, and no one knew why it caught fire. Their home was a distance from the village, and the people there did not hear any cries for help. The female lead's gaze flickered slightly. She had some impression of this dirty girl. Although she was usually dirty and smelly, she once accidentally saw that the dirty girl's hands were long and white, washed by water, making her feel ashamed. She thought to herself that it was a pity to have such a pair of good hands. The burning of the house was discovered early the next morning by people. When they discovered it, the house had already been burned to ashes, and 3 charred corpses were also carried out by the villagers. Later, the villagers buried them in one place, and they all thought they were pitiful people. The people in the village always thought this was an accident, until the middle of this article, when the female protagonist was wandering in the county town, she accidentally heard a person named Miaolin in an alley say that he had committed something, including setting fire in Zhou village, because there was a beautiful mute woman in that family who refused to remarry him. This Miaolin is from Chadao village. The female protagonist has a strong sense of justice and went directly to the Public Security Bureau to report it. Then, this matter finally came to an end. The people in the village couldn't help but sigh. If the mute mother had married the people in the village earlier, such a thing wouldn't have happened. Miaolin's mouth twitched when she saw this. System, is it necessary for me to appear in this plot? Follow the plot. How is she going? She was basically taken in by one stroke, and even if she was a bug, she got the idea that when the plot should appear, she reversed the plot. That's what's called a bug, right? It's not yet time for her to appear, and she's just a female corpse. How should she follow the plot? At this point, the system scanned the entire book into its own story library, and then he cried, "Host, I tied the wrong person." Miaolin clenched her fist and said, "You bound me and only gave me 3 years of lifespan. Now you tell me, you tied the wrong person. Who do you want to tie? What should I do with my life?" End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Patch is others' recognition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Patch is others' recognition. The system was depressed. The host is an external soul, a bug in this book. I originally wanted to bind Miaolin from an apocalyptic book. The system cried again as it spoke. Miaolin from the Book of the Apocalypse. Miaolin's mouth twitched, afraid it might also be herself, right? She continued, "I came from the end of the world. Can you tell me what exactly Miaolin you want to bind to looks like?" The 9th level planting master, the main brain, said that this person cannot die. She is related to many people's lives, but to save her, we can only bind her as a bug, extend her life for 3 years, and then continue to patch it to extend her life. Miaolin spat out a mouthful of old blood and said, "I've been dead in my previous life. Are you still tying a yarn? I've finally been reborn now, and you've come after me to do this. Do you think I can spare you? You're giving me 100 years of longevity." Miaolin is so angry that her heart, liver, and lungs are about to explode. Wait. Not right. This dirty girl only has 1 month's lifespan left in the book. So she should be able to successfully change her life, right? After all, the system has been given a lifespan of 3 years. Miaolin shook her fist. It seems that the system is quite awesome, but can she say? "System, how do you want to compensate me? I'm just a patch system." "Then you can add an extra patch and give me a beginner gift pack first." Miaolin naturally wanted to embrace the gift in her arms. The system cried until it hiccuped, and it's really rare to see such a weak system. Newcomer gift package. It seems like there really is one. Why did he forget? At this point, the system directly delivered a small bottle to Miaolin's hand. "This is a beginner's gift package." Miaolin looked at the small bottle in her hand and said, "What is this?" "A bottle of 10 health-enhancing pills. Once the host finishes eating them, the body will return to a healthy state. The system, because you are so awesome, will call you Xiao Tongzi later." Miaolin felt that the body was a little too weak after listening to the music. This body-building pill really suits her. The system was very frustrated. After receiving a big gift package, he received a name he didn't like. However, thinking about what he had done, he didn't have the strength to argue with the host. The system decided to contact the main brain, but what made him want to cry was that he couldn't reach the main brain. "What should we do? The main brain is missing." Miaolin left the space and looked at her own house. It was about to burn down in a month. The plot suggests that this house must be destroyed, right? 3 charred corpses. It should be said that 3 people had to be burned to death, right? Miaolin thought inwardly, the fire set by Miaolin must be counted among the people who burned to death, right? The system was originally secretly crying, but now it speaks with a crying tone. The host cannot harm anyone. "He killed me first, can't I kill him back? The host needs to be a good person. I've been working on it for a while, but you're actually a Madonna system, little Tongzi. I really misread you." The main brain once said, "We cannot let the host do anything bad. I'll ask you, is that Miaolin a good person? No. So if he kills me and I kill back, can it be considered legitimate defense? Calculate. Since that's the case, if he really wants to kill me and I do the opposite, then we can only call it eliminating harm for the people. After all, he's a bad person, isn't he? The host seems to be right too. Miaolin has come from the end of the world. You should know that in the end of the world, she never took the initiative to harm others, but if others came to harm her first, it would be embarrassing. She is not easy to get along with. Isn't that all for now? Even the best person, when hurt, can't stand and wait to die. Miaolin couldn't help but hear the system crying, "You're the system, not the crying bag. What's there to cry about? I can't contact the main brain anymore, you're just a black hole that brought me into this world. Now that it's okay, the main brain can't even be contacted. What should I do?" The system cried loudly again. What's wrong without a brain? Without a brain, it's more comfortable. If you really need a brain, you can treat me as your brain, Miaolin said directly. The host is a big bug and cannot be the main brain. Humph, I can't survive this big bug. Can your system, which can't be connected to the main brain, continue to survive? Miaolin asked unhappily. The system was scared and said, the host doesn't want to die, does it? Who wants to die if they can live? Miaolin said in a sullen tone. It's not impossible for the host to want to be the main brain, but the host's patches need to be completed before considering the issue of being the main brain. Miaolin's face twitched. She's not a computer, she doesn't have a program on her body, and she can't be the main brain. Just now, it was just a casual remark. This is quite serious, but when it comes to it, Xiao Tongzi is still very easy to deceive. Miaolin looked at the house that was about to be burned down with anger and said, didn't you watch the plot? In another month, this house will be burned down. Strictly speaking, it's less than a month, said the system. Miaolin sighed and glanced at her house. Although it was a dirt house, thatched grass still made up the majority, and the roof was also thatched. No wonder it burned completely. But since we can't contact the main brain, it shouldn't be useful for her to leave the plot, right? Xiaotongzi, can we really patch the plot without a main brain? The host can rest assured that any good aspect can be used as a patch, even without going through the host's brain. Xiaotongzi can help the host make the patch. On the positive side, do we still need to do good things? The host can earn others' favor and receive gifts from the plot characters, which can be considered as patching. This means I need to gain more recognition from people. Miaolin was speechless. With her current image and the relationship between her family and the people of Zhaohua village, it was too difficult to win the favor of the villagers. The plot still has to go, this place must become ruins, the system said firmly, because in the later stages of the plot, this will be a gathering place for wolf packs. Miaolin's face was about to twitch. So where do our family live? Living in caves makes them more sturdy. Isn't there a few caves behind your house? That's abandoned, and people have died inside. Miaolin's face turned green. Miaolin has also read the records in the book, and the system says that the plot must be followed. So she really needs to consider the issue of renovating the cave dwellings. Miaolin pondered for a moment, perhaps it would be safer to wrap the doors and windows of the cave with iron mesh. Miaolin asked at this moment, Xiao Tongzi, how many patches can be added to follow the plot? 2,000ths. 2,000ths. You can only make up for 2,000ths by burning my whole house. Miaolin was so angry that she wanted to scratch the system, but unfortunately, the system was invisible. Only by gaining someone's favor can one get 100,000th of the patch. The system feels that 2,000ths is already quite a lot. Miaolin was so angry that her liver was sore. She wanted to let it go and die. Anyway, it's not that she hasn't died before. However, at this point, the system said, host, if I merge with the host space, maybe I can help the host more. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Zhou Sheng's Goodwill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Zhou Sheng's Goodwill. Miaolin snorted coldly, space belongs to me. Even if I die in the future, I can still pass it on to my descendants. This space can be used as a carrier, but when it reaches the hands of the system, won't it eventually be swept away by the system? Do you really think she's stupid? The system is silent, and he doesn't know what kind of space it will become after integrating it. Host, I can't contact the main brain at the moment, nor can I provide any guarantee to the host. The system is really frustrated, and whether it can be detached after fusion is really an unknown number, and he dare not make any guarantees. Since we can't guarantee anything, let's not say anything. Miaolin looked up at the big green mountain behind the house. Their house was located at the entrance of this village, and people came and went every day. It's really hard to hide many secrets, but living in the cave behind it is different. She can be considered to have developed further inside and won't attract anyone's attention. At best, she dug deeper. There are several dilapidated kiln holes about 40 or 50 meters behind her house, which are really quite dilapidated. The original owner had seen them before, and it was a kind of hole-set hole. The hole inside was pitch black, like a giant beast about to swallow people, making people feel creepy as soon as they approached. Moreover, next to the cave dwelling is the only mountain road leading up to Daqing Mountain, at least this side can be called a road. As for other places, they are really too steep to reach. In order to avoid the fire, she really needs to find a way to transform those cave dwellings. Isn't it just a hole in the hole or a hole in the hole? However, it is a fact that there are many wild beasts on Mount Daqing. After all, at night, the sound of wolves' howls comes from Mount Daqing, and there will be no shortage of meat in the future. By the way, it seems that there was also a record in the book that in the winter of the year when the female protagonist arrived, wolves entered the village. Because her house was abandoned, the wolf pack directly stayed in her abandoned yard for a long time during the period of heavy snow sealing the mountains. Thinking of this, Miaolin's face turned ugly again. It seemed that not only did the cave need renovation, but it was also better to build a high courtyard wall. If the wall was too low, it could not prevent wolves. Miaolin sighed and sat on the bench in the yard, then propped her chin up and began to think. What should she do next? Anyway, she has to obtain the consent of her grandmother and mute mother, right? If you want to avoid a fire, you need to quietly live in the cave. Perhaps she can quietly renovate the cave first. Miaolin looked at the time. It was still some time before her grandmother and the others got off work. She ran straight to the backyard and leaned against the wall to take a look. There were no bear children from the village behind her, so she climbed over the wall. Actually, she's not afraid of those children either, but she doesn't like them making up catchy phrases and the name dirty. Miaolin ran straight to the front of those caves, which looked quite complete. There were 3 caves, and the rest had completely collapsed, making it impossible to see the appearance of the caves. However, even for 3 relatively complete caves, there are signs of collapse on both sides of the cave. The middle cave is still intact, but it happens to be the cave where the deceased lived. Miaolin walked directly to the cave entrance. It was daytime now, and the doors and windows of the cave had been demolished by the villagers. The outside cave was still very bright, but there were really many messy soil and stones inside. In general, this kind of place should be a place for children to play in the village, but because people have died horizontally, adults do not allow children to come over. Moreover, people often hear noise in the cave, so spreading rumors is like a forbidden area in the village. There are bats inside. The system spoke at this moment, there are still quite a few. Upon hearing this, Miaolin immediately took out a torch and walked directly into the cave. Others were not afraid of her, so she took the torch and walked straight into the cave. Countless bats were hanging upside down on the top of the cave, and seeing them made people feel creepy. Miaolin reached out and used a torch to sneak around the top of the cave. Coupled with her verbal drive, these bats were scared and flew out yesterday. There are really many bats, and it seems like there are hundreds of them flying out. The remaining one or two that don't move were also kicked out by Miaolin with a stick. The hole inside is not large, only about 10 square meters in size. There is only one pit inside, and half of it has collapsed. It is said that the person committed suicide in this pit. Does the host want to knock on the earthen con? That's natural, this hole needs to be enlarged, preferably to fit a container. Miaolin planned this way. The host currently only has woody abilities. If they can awaken earthy abilities, it will be much easier for the host to clear this area, the system reminded Miaolin. You're right. Miaolin felt that she might need to awaken another ability. Miaolin drove the bat away, but she knew very well that if she didn't do anything, the bat would still come. Miaolin found some mosquito repellent in her own space and sprayed it directly into the cave. She sprayed all the way into the cave outside, even spraying around the outside of the cave. After Miaolin finished spraying, she immediately put away the medicine. Just as she had just put it away, she heard someone call her, "Dirty." Miaolin looked at the source of the voice and spoke to a young man who was about her height. She had a mark on this young man because his mother was also a widow, and his name was Zhou Sheng. Miaolin tilted her head and didn't respond to him, but Zhou Sheng had already walked up to her and said, "Don't play here in the future, it's not good here." Ding, gain one person's favor, increase the favorability by 0.001. The system's voice rang out. Miaolin didn't remember how good her relationship was with Zhou Sheng, but since the other party recognized her, she accepted the kindness and said, "Thank you." Zhou Sheng spoke seriously and said, "Dirty, although the cave here belongs to your family, that person died horizontally. There is something dirty in this cave." Miaolin said, "Why remind me? Even the children in the village should reject her." Zhou Sheng Dao, I was also excluded by them. Miaolin smiled at this moment and said, "Thank you, Zhou Shenga." Zhou Sheng waved his hand and said, "I'm going to fetch firewood. You should go home quickly. It's almost time to get off work." Miaolin nodded and then waved her hand to Zhou Sheng before leaving. Perhaps not all the children in this village are bear kids either. However, in this era, there seem to be quite a few widows. Miaolin climbed over the wall and returned home. Her grandmother and mute mother were about to finish work, and she planned to cook a pot of hot water for them. But when Miaolin walked over to the kitchen, she found it locked. It was then that she remembered that the original owner had thought of helping with cooking, but these two elders did not allow her to do it, fearing that she might hurt herself. Miaolin sighed, feeling like she was going to be spoiled. At this moment, Miaolin raised her hand. It had only been an afternoon, and she had already adapted to her dirty appearance. She didn't even remember to take a shower and see what she looked like now. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Evil Men Come at Midnight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Evil men come at midnight. The whistle for dismissal sounded, and Grandma Miao and the mute mother returned quickly. They opened the door and saw Miaolin sitting obediently in the yard. Both of their faces smiled, and their family's servants were really obedient. As soon as the mute mother entered the courtyard, she inserted the door from inside. Although the low wall of the courtyard did not have much effect, inserting the door seemed to give a little sense of security. After washing her hands, Grandma Miao touched her granddaughter's head and went to cook. The mute mother took dirty clothes to the yard and started washing clothes. Both elders were very diligent, and Miaolin felt a bit helpless. It seemed that she was the most useless in this family. However, at this moment, she smelled the stench on her body again and didn't want to do anything else. The smell was really strong. The dinner was congee with wild vegetables. Although millet was put in it, it was just a little bit, and Miaolin's rice was the thickest. Miaolin let out a deep sigh. She didn't distribute the food to the two elders. According to the original owner's memory, if she gave the food to the two of them, they would be anxious and think she was sick. So when the food arrived, the original owner ate it hard, afraid that the two elders at home would think she was sick and take her to see a doctor. But the food at home needs to be enriched. After dinner, the sky completely darkened, there was no electricity in the village, and there were no kerosene lamps or candles at home. There is no moon today, and the entire village is pitch black. Apart from occasional noise from a few households, there are also a few barks of dogs in the village, which is almost a dead silence. In the middle of the night, Miaolin was awakened by the howling of wolves. She didn't even know that she could sleep so peacefully without any warning. Miaolin lay quietly in bed, listening to the howling wolves in the distance. She was not very tired now. Just as Miaolin was considering whether to count the sheep to sleep, she heard the sound of someone coming in from the yard, as if someone had climbed over a wall. Miaolin was instantly alert. She got up from the bed and quietly walked to the window by the door. Looking out through the window, although there was no moonlight tonight, Miaolin was a superpower. She saw the dark shadow in her yard. The dark figure headed straight towards the mute mother's room. Miaolin clenched her fist and the person walked to the mute mother's door. They started pushing the door, which was inserted, but he didn't push it open at once. Then she started pushing the door with force, but it still remained motionless. Miaolin narrowed her eyes slightly. Her house doors were all renovated and firmly inserted inside, and her grandmother was also prepared for the rain. Looking at that person's body, not very tall, which is 1.75 meters, he can climb over the wall, and this action is still very agile, definitely not older. The mute mother's room was right next to Miaolin's, and it was too close to her window. Miaolin took out 2 grass seeds and bounced them directly onto the person's head. The person was focused on prying open the door, so she didn't even feel it. Miaolin extended her hand directly, fearing that she wouldn't be able to stimulate the seeds if the distance was too far. Although Miaolin's ability level is only 1, it is still easy for a small grass to grow and sprout with iron, and she also took out a wooden crystal core, using her abilities while absorbing them. Quickly, with just a few beeps, the 2 seeds sprouted above the man's head, and then, under the urging of Miaolin, they began to grow rapidly. It's also fortunate that the distance between the 2 people didn't exceed 2 meters, otherwise Miaolin's abilities might have expired. I don't know if the man is too focused, or what's going on. He didn't even notice the grass growing on his head. It wasn't until the cool grass leaves drooped onto his face that he felt something on his forehead. No, it should be something on his head. He felt a heavy feeling. It seems like something is pressing on top of his head. He reached out and touched his head directly, and a cold and icy mass lay on top of his head. It was so big that he was scared and let out a scream. And not only that, he wanted to pull off the thing on top of his head, but what he didn't expect was this pull, which directly pulled his hair forward, as if it had grown onto his head. He had no idea that the grass roots nurtured by Miaolin had grown together with his hair, and he would naturally feel pain when he pulled them. The man was really scared to death. He shook left and right, and then jumped a few times, but the thing grew firmly on his head, and even the icy cold thing pressed against his face. Moreover, with his shaking movements, there were even a few more sticks coming down. The man was so scared that he fell to the ground, but those things still lingered around him relentlessly. He even felt that it seemed alive and slid over his face. The man let out another scream and then ran over the wall. At this moment, Miaolin sat on the ground with a pale face. She smiled and then cried again. Difficulty. From this time, it can be seen that it was difficult for this family to live, it was really difficult. Why move out of the village? Grandma is probably afraid that when someone picks up their house wall, they will be seen and gossip, right? After all, whenever such a thing happens, regardless of whether the reason is with you or not, the people in the village will gossip. Victim guilt theory. Miaolin originally thought that the people in the village wouldn't do too bad things, but reality slapped her in the face. She not only needs to consider the fire in a month's time, but also the harassment from evil people. There was such a commotion in the yard, and she heard her grandmother cough. Then she said, "Mute mother, yeah, that person has left. You guys go to bed, don't open the door and come out." Grandma Miao was afraid there were still people in the yard. There was no sound on the mute mother's side. Miaolin knew that mute mother could hear voices, and she could probably imagine how scared mute mother would be. She really wanted to comfort mute mother, but she knew that whenever she opened the door, her grandmother and mute mother would run out. Moreover, she is a bit weak at the moment. If she falls outside, it will cause concern for her grandmother and mute mother. There was no movement on the mute mother's side. Miaolin let out a deep sigh and sat motionless by the window. Her powers were completely depleted, and she now had no strength to stand up. Too weak, really too weak, isn't it just that I pushed 2 grass plants to grow more than 1 meter? No, she still needs to improve now. Miaolin flashed directly into the space, she had to continue working hard, and this home needed her protection. The book only mentions a fire, but is it really just a simple fire? What else happened at that time? How can the whole family be burned to death without any reaction? Miaolin doesn't believe that the 3 of her family are all sleeping soundly. In this situation tonight, my grandmother will never sleep soundly every night, and my mute mother will never dare to sleep soundly. So how exactly did their family die? That door couldn't have been locked by someone, could it? Why don't you escape if it catches fire? Or was he drugged? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Enhancing Abilities. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Enhancing Abilities. Miaolin was really pressured at this moment. She took a 3rd level wooden crystal core and swallowed it in one gulp. She was only 1 level wooden now, so swallowing this 3rd level crystal core was a bit too forced, but Miaolin couldn't wait anymore. As for the earth type and so on, she won't consider it now. She has improved one ability first, and then let's talk about awakening another ability. Since that man came once, there is a possibility that he will come again, and Miaolin thinks she really can't afford to gamble. Miaolin's ability is only level 1. If it weren't for her timely absorption of a level 1 crystal nucleus just now, it is estimated that her woody ability foundation might have been affected. The energy of the 3rd level crystal nucleus is very strong, and a part of this powerful energy has restored the energy she consumed completely, while the rest directly rushes into her body and begins to rampage. This powerful energy almost knocked Miaolin unconscious. Miaolin quickly mobilized this energy and began to challenge her superpower level. This energy was too powerful. Miaolin used this energy to boost her superpower to level 2 without stopping, but now her body is overloaded. Miaolin relied on her strong perseverance to avoid falling into a coma, and it wasn't until she had absorbed all the energy from the crystal nucleus that she finally relaxed and fell asleep. It had been 5 or 6 hours since Miaolin woke up again, and she quietly returned to her room. It was already daylight outside, and she had planned to dress neatly and walk out, but soon she discovered the dirt on her body. The energy of the 3rd level crystal nucleus is so pure for her that it even has the effect of cleansing essence and marrow. Miaolin smelled the smell on her body and it became even more intense. She immediately returned to the space and rushed into the bathroom of her small villa to take a shower. It wasn't until half an hour later that Miaolin came out of the bathroom. Her face was red and she walked a bit crooked. As for why? She was knocked unconscious by her current body. The original owner was too beautiful, and his whole body was snow-white, which goes without saying. He looked too delicate, a bit like an elf who accidentally entered the human world. It took Miaolin a long time to come to her senses. She was a bit worried about not being able to protect herself anymore. She was too beautiful, and this appearance was born in a rural family, which was definitely a disaster. Miaolin casually put on a suspender skirt and ran to the warehouse. She took out a bottle of medicine from a miscellaneous room and evenly applied it to her hands, face, limbs, and neck. This potion can make a person's skin turn yellow. After it was done, she found a suitable underwear for her current body from a miscellaneous room where children's clothes were stored, and directly put it on her body. As for the other clothes, Miaolin still went back to the room outside the space, looked for the clothes she was wearing, and directly put them on. She took out a mirror and looked at her face, which was painted yellow but still very delicate. Miaolin took out the dark powder and began to apply it on her face, then made herself plain before stopping. Now her hands are dark yellow, which saves her the need for mud. Now she doesn't have to worry about eating the mud in her mouth. The yard was quiet, and Miaolin walked out of the room. The doors of her grandmother and mother were all open, and she had already gone to work. She walked directly into the kitchen, where there was a bowl of egg custard in the pot. Miaolin's eyes turned red. Although it was the mute mother who scared her, her grandmother and mute mother left the delicious food for her, probably afraid that she might be scared. Grandma Miao and mute Nyang both called her in the morning, but did not receive a response. Grandma Miao felt that her family should have been scared and couldn't get up because she slept late, so she steamed egg custard directly to calm her down. After eating the egg custard, Miaolin began to observe her body. Her abilities had advanced to the mid to late stage of the second level. Although she was still weak, there should be no problem for her to use her abilities to defeat a man now. After all, the energy of the crystal nucleus was abundant last night, and her body had also been strengthened, which was also a benefit of swallowing the crystal nucleus. Miaolin came to the well with an empty bowl to clean, and she heard voices coming from outside the door, including the female lead Yuanan. Yuanan was asking the people around him, "Wenna, whose family is this? Why do you live so far from the village? If this wolf goes down the mountain, he must run to this family first, right?" Weina replied, "Anan, this is the mute mother's family in the village. Their family has been widows for 2 generations, and it's a shame that they have a girl at home. Otherwise, this family would be too pitiful." At this moment, a female voice snorted coldly, "What's so pitiful? Both women can't take care of one child well. That girl is a bit silly and dirty all over. The children said she still has a smell of chicken droppings on her body." Weina said, "Yaki, don't say that. Ah, isn't it? 2 widows can't take care of one child well." Yuanan was shocked. Is the girl in this family so miserable? Maybe it's too poor, right? Or maybe that child is really a bit silly. He's already 12 years old and looks like he's 8 or 9 years old. I've seen him a few times, but he's been bullied by other children in the village. It's really pitiful." Another female voice added, which gave Miaolin a familiar feeling. Yuanan said, "What a pity. If she keeps herself clean, I think it's easier for the children to accept her, right?" "Anan, there aren't many clean children in the village," Wenna said, "those children are just bullying the weak and afraid of the hard." Miaolin looked out through the crack in the door and only saw the backs of 4 women, all of whom were educated youth from the village. It seems that they are going to the town. Zhaohua village is quite a distance from the town, even taking a cart would take an hour. If it were purely on foot, it would probably take even longer. Miaolin walked to the backyard. She is now 2nd level in her abilities and can improve her family's life. She directly gave birth to all the vegetables currently grown in her backyard, and to her surprise, there was a cucumber seedling inside that she had urged to grow. Miaolin raised her eyebrows. This thing needed to be climbed on a shelf. She took a stick from the corner of the wall and set up a shelf for the cucumber seedlings. Then, she wrapped the vines around the shelf and gave birth to another one. After ripening 5 or 6 cucumbers, she stopped working. Watching the vegetables in the backyard become a bit lush, she stood up and picked 3 cucumbers before leaving the backyard. As soon as she walked to the front yard, Miaolin saw a thin and tall man walking past the door. Her wall was too low, and the man turned his head and saw her in the yard. The first impression this person gave Miaolin was that she was very handsome and cool. Looking back at her novels, I'm afraid it's not the male lead Gu Yuan, right? At this point, the system said, the host can conquer him, and the male protagonist who conquers the world can directly have the patch. Miaolin didn't notice. When Gu Yuan saw her, his gaze narrowed slightly because he saw the cucumber in Miaolin's hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Fragrance on the Body. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Fragrance on the Body. Upon hearing the system's words, Miaolin immediately refused. Xiao Tongzi, I won't be a third party. Your values must be positive, otherwise I won't need you anymore. I won't get involved in other people's emotions. Since the male and female lead in the book is the original match, it's locked down. She won't get involved, and she's also a big age difference from the male lead. Miaolin didn't know that the man she was slandering was doubting her. How could that girl have cucumbers? Isn't this the season for growing cucumbers? Gu Yuan didn't know why, but when he saw the cucumber in Miaolin's hand, he felt like he wanted to eat it. He didn't know, it was because cucumbers were nurtured by Miaolin that attracted him. After all, he was an ancient warrior who was very sensitive to energy sensing. At this moment, Gu Yuan was already thinking about how to establish a good relationship with this little girl. Miaolin didn't know Gu Yuan's thoughts. She was only thinking about when she would awaken her Earth-type abilities, so that she could first raise her own wall. The feeling that others can have a clear view of the yard from outside the wall is really uncomfortable, like being peeked into privacy, which is extremely uncomfortable. She just used a 3-level wood crystal nucleus, and it may be a bit difficult to awaken using a soil crystal nucleus in the short term. After all, using crystal nuclei of level 3 or above is easy to awaken. I remember in my previous life, at the beginning of the apocalypse, there were people who did not naturally awaken their abilities. However, there were many who tried to awaken their abilities by swallowing the crystal core. Although the chance of success was very low, and there was even a risk of becoming a zombie, there were still many who tried. After all, for ordinary people, the temptation was really too great. The apocalypse is a catastrophic disaster for ordinary people. However, in the later stages of the apocalypse, these crystal nuclei were purified and swallowed without turning into zombies. However, the chance of awakening abilities was much lower. If one can obtain a higher order crystal nucleus, the chances of awakening are still high, but the body of an ordinary person is too weak to withstand the energy inside this crystal nucleus. An accidental one can explode. The kitchen door was not locked today. Miaolin estimated the time, put down the cucumber, and then ran to the backyard to pick 2 scallions and a handful of vegetables, which she had just given birth to. Miaolin directly boiled congee in a pot, and there were several corn cakes in the basket. Miaolin warmed up for 2.5 times, and then cold mixed the cucumber. When she put the rice on the table, she heard the whistle. Grandma Miao and the mute mother come back very quickly every day. When they returned home and saw the lunch on the table, Grandma Miao's eyes narrowed slightly and then looked outside. Their table was in the kitchen, so there was no need to worry about someone seeing them. The mute mother always closes the door when she comes back every day, so there's no need to worry about someone breaking in. Yaya, how did this cucumber come from? Grandma Miao looked at Miaolin. Miaolin pointed to the backyard and said, it was picked in the backyard. Upon hearing this, Grandma Miao didn't care about eating and ran straight to the backyard. When she returned, she was completely dazed. Sitting at the table, Grandma Miao said to eat, and then the family started eating. Miaolin originally thought she could finish half a cake, but she overestimated herself and couldn't swallow the cake at all. Miaolin chewed hard and ate congee. She only ate half of it. She broke the rest directly to Grandma Miao and dumb mother. Yaya, eat. Grandma Miao frowned when she saw her granddaughter eating so little. Yaya, what's wrong with her? Miaolin said, Grandma, I stayed at home and didn't move. I'm not hungry at all. Grandma Miao was a bit skeptical when she heard Miaolin's words, but since her granddaughter really didn't want to eat, she couldn't force it either. That cake was eventually shared between Grandma Miao and Mutnyang. The cucumber cold dishes were also eaten up, and the congee in the pot was also drunk. Miaolin thought about the food that her grandmother and dumb mother had cooked before. It seemed that both her grandmother and dumb mother had never eaten enough before. The mute mother tidied up the bowl, while Grandma Miao pulled Miaolin into her room. The decorations in Grandma Miao's room are similar to those in Miaolin's room. Apart from the bed, there is an additional table. Grandma Miao pulled Miaolin to sit at the table. Yaya, that dish. Grandma, that dish grows on its own, Miaolin said seriously. Grandma Miao touched Miaolin's head and said, yes, that dish grows on its own. However, Grandma Miao quickly smelled a fragrant scent on Miaolin's body, and her face changed. Yaya, why did she change clothes? Miaolin thought for a moment and said, Grandma, I smell a foul odor on my clothes. Today, I heard those educated youth say that I have a foul odor on my body. Grandma Miao sighed and said, Yaya's clothes can cover up the fragrance. Although Miaolin took a shower today, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, she did not use any fragrant shower gel or anything else. Grandma Miao looked at her granddaughter with a puzzled look and said, our girl has a fragrance on her body. You can cover it with some chicken droppings, understand? Miaolin let out a cry, and Grandma Miao pulled her to the back of the house. There was a cage behind the house where 2 chickens were kept. Grandma Miao held a stick and poked in chicken droppings, then directly rubbed against Miaolin's clothes. The fresh smell of chicken droppings really caught her attention. Miaolin actually had a plan at this moment. Combining the original owner's appearance with the fragrance she received, she suspected that the original owner might be some kind of flower demon. There was a smell of chicken manure on her body again, and Grandma Miao pulled her to the side of the vegetable garden. Fortunately, there was a house blocking it. Otherwise, if the vegetable garden grew like this now, it would bring danger to the family, you know. Grandma Miao directly picked 2 ripe cucumbers from the cucumber vine, then pulled the stick and let the cucumber vine crawl into the field. It's too eye-catching, you know. Although no one should be looking at her backyard, Grandma Miao is still very worried about what if someone sees her. Grandma Miao pulled Miaolin back to the front yard and pushed her back to her room. Yaya, take a nap. You can go out and play in the afternoon. Grandma Miao felt a bit haggard in her heart. The child was too good at thinking things at home, so let her go out and play. Miaolin's eyes lit up as she heard it. Grandma, can I go out and play this afternoon? Grandma Miao said, get a good sleep, then you can go out and play. Miaolin went back to the house and took off her clothes outside. She looked inside the children's room and found that the clothes she had taken off this morning were gone. It seemed that the mute mother had taken them to wash. Miaolin let out a deep sigh and lay down in bed. She thought she couldn't sleep, but to her surprise, she slept soundly. When Miaolin woke up, her grandmother and mute mother had already gone to work. Miaolin walked out of the room, and the door was inserted. Miaolin had to say that the 2 elders in the family had carefully considered and even inserted the door inside. It should have been the mute mother who climbed over the wall to leave, right? They really protected her so well that they could wake her up and have her knock on the door. Sigh. How sad would they be if they knew the original owner was no longer there? End of this chapter. Where did the male lead's cleanliness obsession go in chapter 10 of the original text? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Where did the male lead's cleanliness obsession go in chapter 10 of the original text? Miaolin finally walked out of the yard, carrying a small basket on her back. After locking her own door, she headed straight to the big green mountain behind her. When she went out, she also looked around and there were no bear kids around, which made her breathe a little relieved. Although she had already thought of teaching the bear kids a lesson if they bullied her, it was still best not to touch them. After all, every fight has endless skin. Miaolin went to the cave first and took a look. There were no bats, mosquitoes, or anything else in the cave this time. It seems that this medicine is very effective. Miaolin threw out a long vine and directly cleared the stones and soil outside the cave. In this moment, the entire cave appeared much cleaner. Level 2 ability. Although she can't do anything else, Miaolin thinks this long vine is still very useful, at least she doesn't have to worry about moving it by hand. Miaolin walked out of the cave and then walked directly to the side, going up to Daqing Mountain. She also planned to dig some wild vegetables. The road up to Daqing Mountain is not wide, which is a small path walked by the people in the village. There are some steep places and some earth steps have been dug. Thanks to Miaolin's much better health than before, otherwise she might not be able to climb up this mountain. However, Miaolin didn't climb very high either. When she reached 1/3 of the big green mountain, she stopped. There were some wild vegetables next to her, and her grandmother and mute mother often picked them up. However, it was unclear whether it was due to drought that their growth was not so good. Almost all of them grew close to the ground. Looking around, there was nothing unusual. Miaolin quietly gave birth to these wild vegetables. Seeing that they had grown to 20 centimeters, she stopped her powers and picked them all up in her basket. The small basket was suddenly filled, and Miaolin sat directly on the hillside, then looked at the road to the town, a straight dirt road that was right on her side. There's no one yet. When the male and female hosts come back, the host can take a photo with them. The system spoke directly. Xiao Tongzi, just like me now, do you think I can win the favor of the male and female leads? Host, even if they don't get a good impression now and behave a little pitifully, they may not be able to gain any sympathy. Or if the male and female hosts are not good to the host now, perhaps they can double their favor after the host returns to their original appearance in the future. Once the male and female hosts are split in half, the host's patch will be fixed. It seems to make some sense. I remember the male lead has a cleanliness fetish, right? It seems that most male leads in Mary Sue's female leads have a cleanliness fetish. That's right, so the favoritism I didn't get from the female lead may be even more pronounced on the male lead side. It makes sense. Miaolin's face showed a smile. At this point, the system said, look at that road where someone has returned. Looking from a distance, there were indeed several figures on the straight dirt road. If someone comes back, they may not necessarily be the male and female leads, he said, regardless of whether it's good or not, there are patches to be applied when brushing likes. The system urged, get down the mountain, hurry down. Urge me, isn't it that I'm going down the mountain? Miaolin had already picked up the small basket and walked towards the foot of the mountain. The road to Daqingshan is a bit steep, easy to climb up, but a bit difficult to descend. Fortunately, Miaolin's current altitude is relatively low, so her calves and arms go down the mountain quite quickly. However, on the way, Miaolin picked up something. The system was a bit speechless. Are you so greedy? Pick up a piece of sugar that's melting quickly, there's so much dirt on it. Who said I'm going to eat it? Aren't you saying you want me to get double the favor of others? Since I'm going to the male lead's place to show my affection, I naturally want to take something that I think is good at my age. A piece of melting candy, although not my own, was picked up with certainty. The owner of this candy cherished it very much, and it looked like it should have been peeled and licked many times. Miaolin squinted her eyes, wondering if she would disgust the male lead to death. Why do you suddenly feel a little bad about yourself? The host is right. If he disdains it now, he will definitely double the favor of the host when it returns to its beautiful appearance in the future. Perhaps he can get 3/4 of the patches from him, so the host's pressure will be very low. Miaolin directly added some dirt to this candy before putting it into her pocket. She said that holding it in her hand was a bit sticky, and her disgust surged. She also wrapped it in a layer of dirt, feeling much better. It seems that she didn't have any cleanliness habits before, did she? At this moment, the group of people approached her house, and before Miaolin could see them, she heard their voices. It was the female lead who had returned. Miaolin walked out directly from behind and happened to have a photo with this group of educated youth. Miaolin looked at them curiously, and then a woman saw Miaolin and greeted her with a smile, Yaya. Miaolin had heard this voice before, which felt very familiar. She obtained some information about this woman from the original owner's memory. Ren Xiaoxiao, the only person among the educated youth who had good intentions towards the original owner, no wonder listening to her voice had a sense of familiarity. Sister. Miaolin pretended to be shy and called out, Sister. Ren Xiaoxiao directly took out a fruit candy from his pocket and handed it to Miaolin, eat it yourself, don't be robbed again. Thank you, sister. Miaolin remembered a memory from the original owner. Last time, Ren Xiaoxiao gave her a piece of candy, and the candy was snatched by the bear children in the village. The original owner was also pushed down. Ding! Get patch 0001. The sound of the system came. Ren Xiaoxiao waved his hand at Miaolin and followed Yuanan and the others towards the village. Yuanan and the others did not say anything, but from their eyes, Miaolin saw a strong sense of disgust, which made it impossible to gain favor. After these people left, Miaolin went straight back to the back wall of her home. She needed to wait for the male lead. She has a good piece of candy now, but she can't bear to give it to the male lead. What should she do? This time, Miaolin didn't wait too long. About 15 minutes later, the system reminded her, the male lead is here. Miaolin directly took out the candy she had picked up, wrapped in dirt, which made it much more comfortable to hold. Miaolin walked out from behind the wall and happened to have a photo with Gujiu. Gu Yuan saw Miaolin's house and was thinking about cucumbers. At that moment, Miaolin suddenly walked out from behind, which startled him a lot. To Gu Yuan's surprise, Miaolin suddenly extended a small black paw at him, with a candy covered in soil on it. Gu Yuan's gaze narrowed for a moment, and then he smiled, brother doesn't need it, thank you little girl. Gu Yuan picked up the candy and threw it aside, then took out 3 big white rabbits from his pocket. That candy is dirty and can't be eaten, little girl, eat this, he said, ding. Get patch 0.1. End of this chapter.